This bow was added into the game in Burning Crusade, and it is still fresh. It still looks good. It is fucking insane how good this bow. Yes, this bow came out, I think it came from Archimonde, right? Yeah, it came from Archimonde. In Hyjal. In 2007, they made this. So I think that there are a number of items, even in Classic WoW, that look extremely good. I'm gonna be real.
Meet your next pillar.
I think these look amazing. Like, even in retail WoW, they still look very good. A good example that's not the exact same, this drops from Terran Gorefiend and Black Temple. This looks insanely fucking good. Like, this still looks good, in my opinion. It is nuts. It's so nice. Now, again, I think the Legion bow, that bow, like, this bow clears everything else, right? Like, this is just, like, such a high quality, such a high design model. It's amazing. But, like, everything else is still, like, all I'm saying is there's a spectrum. And some of these pieces, even then, were just, like, insanely well designed.
Jarring to have them in Classic Plus. Plus, this is a terrible idea as Blizzard has the technology and ability to make low-res, low-polygon textures and assets. It's art at the end of the day, and it's not something advanced or extremely difficult to do. Look at old-school RuneScape. The level cap being 70 makes sense as they're adding new content, new items.
I don't want to see the level cap increase. I don't want to see the level cap increase because what we'll do is it will invalidate all of the vanilla content. Yeah, because like the way the way combat tables work in the game is that whenever you're fighting content that's like the same level as you, it has a certain percentage to like hit and miss and stuff like that. So like if you take a character that has the exact same stats and they're level 70 and they go into Naxx versus level 60, they will have a totally different experience because of the combat hit tables. I think that all they need to do is add in new content. Don't increase the level cap. There's no reason to.
The new meta, essentially. It would be strange to have an expansion that's the same level, especially if we don't get new talent or whatever this new direction would take us. The High Elves and Ogres are pretty massively copium as players have wanted them for essentially 2 decades, and if Classic Plus players get them before retail, I can imagine the rioting that'll occur. The rest of the ideas are good, but I'm not sure how much of this is going to be legit. I feel like if this leak is real, it's from an employee who may have been on the team when it was in pre-production, so they're out of touch of what's actually coming. I'm giving this leak a solid 7 out of 10, only because Awakening has been leaked for the last 4 years, maybe even longer, and because every couple leaks has had Chris Metzen returning for far longer than 4 years. Whilst there have been other Classic Plus leaks, most of them have been pure unadulterated fan fiction, so I'm not really going to dive into them, but I'll dive into the ideas and themes behind those said leaks, such as going into Hyjal, a new zone in Gilneas, Borealis being added, I've finished Karazhan, the mysterious portal in Winterspring which probably leads to Hyjal, the Emerald Dream, Grimbatol, Baal Modan, Ajara Crater, and more. A lot of
that's a good start. Okay, we also want to add in the most important one, the Scarlet Citadel 40-man raid, that at the end of it you receive the crystal that you need to take to Outland to have what's his name, Turalian's son help purify the Ashbringer that you get. From Naxxramas, and you can only purify the Ashbringer at the altar in the Scarlet Citadel raid, and then that turns it into the original Ashbringer, and you know, maybe change the stats up, make it a little bit better. No Outland? No, there is Outland. No, you do go to Outland, and like you could even make a massive server event with like them adding Outland into the game, but without it being some kind of crazy thing like unlocking the Dark Portal again. Imagine that. Like the Dark Portal is shut down, there's a massive server-wide event in the same way it's the Scepter of the Shifting Sands, and you unlock Outland again. That would be yeah, like unlock the portal, like yeah, the opening of the gates of AQ. Exactly. Flying? No flying. No flying. Just Outland. Yep, Outland scaled to 60, totally different than the way it is in retail WoW. Like, kind of some of the same general, like, trends, but totally different. And I think that, like, make Outland way more, desolate. Like, no
I think I'm gonna
terraform forest.
purposely fail
I'm
this
talking,
fight.
like, Hellfire Peninsula, Blades Edge Mountains.
Yeah, I'm gonna
Grand.
purposely
That's
fail.
it. No Netherstorm, no fucking Terracar Forest. Oh, Shadow Moon Valley too. We have Shadow Moon Valley. Yeah, Shadow Moon Valley is the main area, right? Blades Edge with no flying mount? Yes. And obviously you would completely redesign and reimagine the zones, but like that would be the style of it. Northrend? If they bring back Northrend, I want Icecrowned to be a barren wasteland tundra that is like, there's like water there, and it's like a, it's like imagine sailing into like Antarctica, basically, and there's like zombies and shit like that in Antarctica. It's supposed to be uninhabitable. Yeah, exactly.
The reason for fail, I'm gonna probably get rid of Mankey.
Yes, exactly like that.
And then get the more XP on Pikachu.
Leaks simply talk about Classic Plus as a finished vanilla, a world in which vanilla launched with all the content it had planned but had to scrap due to timelines and deliverables. Now, that is the ideal version of Classic Plus, a simple game that continues the classic approach and finishes Classic itself whilst fixing what's wrong with the game. And fuck off with the no changes shit. This is Classic Plus. We want all the goddamn changes. Basically, Classic Plus seems like
I think that they should be extremely conservative with changes. The changes that I think they should make is they should buff a few of the underperforming classes. Like they should give some sort of Moonkin mana return, and they should also do some form of Moonkin mana return, like a Ret Paladin Crusader strike, maybe like something for Elemental Shaman, but otherwise don't change anything else. Give Paladins a taunt. I don't know about that. Because, I mean, like, the thing is, like, Consecration and, like, the Paladin AoE threat is just so good and so much better than, like, everything else. That, I think that I'd be worried that they would invalidate Warriors if they had a taunt. I don't know if that would be good or not. But I think they should be very conservative with, like, the changes, but I do think they should make a lot of it.
Expansion after Cataclysm has run its course, with Classic Plus being in development right now but not ready for launch. We already know that Cataclysm Classic is coming, and I'd be genuinely surprised if Blizzard didn't do it. Heck, look at some BlizzCon 2021 official art. If that Deathwing over there is meant to represent Heroes of the Storm, I'll eat a sock, especially since Heroes of the Storm is scrapped. But Classic
I think they'll... Okay. Uh-oh. Look who it is.
Plus will very likely be announced at the same time so we can get hyped and prepare for Classic Plus whilst they bolster Cataclysm Classic's player numbers. But what if Classic Plus isn't enough for your leaking needs, and what if you just don't care about Classic Plus? Well then, here's the upcoming critically acclaimed Arcane Season 2 Warcraft Chronicles. The animated special made by, I think, the same people who made Edge Runners, I'm not sure honestly, with some Night Elf looking shoulder pads, could be a great way to introduce the lore to the masses the same way Arcane did for League of Legends. What's that? Classic Plus and WoW anime isn't enough for you? Don't worry, your pretty little head one.
I'm kind of worried about Blizzard doing an anime. I think it's gonna be garbage. I think what they should do is that, I hope they don't try to do a new story. Just do Arthas. Just do Arthas. Just don't. No, just do Arthas. I don't want to see any sort of, like, dumb shit. Just do Arthas. It'll be simple. That's it.
A little bit, as they aren't the only thing being overwhelmed by leaks. Retail WoW has even more leaks than Classic Plus. We currently have 3 major leaks, such as WoW, A Pirate's Life for Me, which a lot of people covered already, an adventure to the other side of Azeroth where we discover some ancient lore and history. It sounds like a cool idea, and the other side of Azeroth is something Blizzard will eventually use, even if not now. The next leak is the Forgotten Dwarves of Kaz Algar, a dwarf, earthen, or elemental themed expansion, which we learned thanks to someone data mining on Reddit, which was then covered on Wowhead. We know that
I don't know, really, a dwarf expansion. I think that idea, that's really cool, but I don't know if it's really gonna happen. I think they should have done that, like, after Wrath. I think, like, now it's, like, it's like, it's too far. And also, I feel like dwarves are so focused, it's like a passion on expansion. Like, I wish that, like, back in Warcraft 2, bro, you had all of, like, you had, like, the Stone Reaver clan. You had the Burning Blade clan. You had the fucking Frostwolf clan. You had the Deadeye clan. And you had all of these fucking, like, different tribes and chieftains of the tribes. Like, it was Warlords of Draenor. Yes, dude. And you had the Warlords of Draenor. They were the warlords. It was fucking insanely awesome.
Actually,
so
hold on.
fucking good. And then, like, all
I need to make
the
you a little bit
Dragon
longer,
Maw
yep.
clan. Yeah, exactly. And, like, it would be really cool if we had an expansion that brought in all of the clans of the, like, the Wildhammer dwarves, the Dark Iron dwarves, the, like, there's, like, I think 2 other ones I'm just not thinking of. Let's see, the Dwarf Maxing, yeah, exactly. Bronzebeard, yeah, all of them. And you had, like, you know, the Horde and Alliance ones, right? You bring back the Orc clans and then the Dwarf clans. That would be really cool.
This has some basis of truth, as the Heroic Edition mount reward for the next expansion is quite literally called the Algarian Storm Rider, which is quite literally a griffin of some kind. There is also lore in-game which talks about Kaz Algar, but only minimally. I could be wrong, but hey, if the shoe fits, you know what I mean? And the final leak is a continuation of the Wowhead data mining and is essentially called Stormbreak, which I think is based off WoW Eclipse as separately. But nonetheless, it's about returning to Azeroth and the whole place changing slowly but surely without intervention and questing, as well as new mechanics and systems. As you can see with Stormbreak and the MMO champion warriors debating this entire thing back and forth and trying to prove if these screenshots are real or fake. Whilst I don't know if this is real or not, it looks legitimate, looks high in quality, and seems to be almost an homage to vanilla, which makes sense for 11.0, an essential soft reboot of World of Warcraft. And the leaks for
They can't do a soft reboot, it has to be a hard reboot. Yeah, it has to be a hard reboot. You have to completely reboot the game. You can't just add in a bunch of other random stuff, etc. It has to be a hard reboot. To change everything. There needs to be a cataclysm of everything. I think what they should do is they should make it to where, like, you can have all of your old stuff, but only in, like, a garrison or something like that. And otherwise, everything else is totally open. And it's all reset and everything's different.
Stormbreak themselves clearly have the same vibe and feeling that the Dragonflight leaks had, so hey, never say never. So with all these leaks, all these images, these what ifs, this overwhelming hope that we, in Gordon Ramsay's words,
finally, it's a good fucking thing.
I personally believe that these leaks are all mostly false, not counting the data mining from Wowhead. Not because they have overwhelming evidence against them, but because these all seem to be in vein with what Blizzard has already planned. Nothing here is unique, outlandish, etc. It seems to be people guessing in the ballpark of something that Blizzard would actually already do. Dwarves and their shenanigans are kind of expected for retail, all because of the Algarian Storm Rider leak. And Classic Plus could be literally any of the 100+ unfinished content portions from vanilla. So even
I think that they should be very careful about adding things in the Classic Plus. I am kind of worried that they'll mess it up or do something wrong. I just hope that they listen to the community and they don't make very unpopular decisions.
Parts of these leaks are true. They were lucky guesses in my opinion, and I do think that they are off. How off, I don't know. Ignoring the leaks, what do you want for the future of WoW? Let me know in the comments below. If you liked the video, make sure you watch this video about my opinion on Classic Plus's future in 2024. Subscribe if you're cute, and if you're ugly, hit subscribe anyways. What do you have to lose? Ebonheart out.
I guess I'll subscribe then. I think it's a good video. I'm gonna link it to you guys. Ebonheart only has 1,000 subs. Make sure to give it a like if you enjoyed the video. I can always appreciate somebody who makes a 6-minute video. Okay? Especially as somebody who makes usually 1 hour and 6-minute videos. So yeah, there's the video right there. Make sure to give it a like. I like that video a lot. I will have to say, I think that they need to focus on Classic. I do. I think retail WoW is so played out, so drawn out. Like, retail WoW...
Killers at the Flower Mill.
Wait, we're in an Airheads commercial. Want to skip it?
Skip.
I was thinking about this a lot. And I was actually talking to my dad about this yesterday. And I was saying that, like, the best fantasy stories are the ones where you never truly touch the divine. And what I mean by that is, like, in Lord of the Rings, you can watch all of Lord of the Rings and not know what a Valar or a Maiar spirit is at all. Gandalf is a wizard who can kind of cast spells. oh, there's a big Balrog. The Balrog was, oh, wow, right? It was a really big deal. It was a big demon. But then he's gone, that's it. You never really touch the divine. And I also was talking about like the, fucking, what was it? Conan the Barbarian. Methuselah Doom. This is James Earl Keen. James Earl Jones. Who played the, Darth Vader. Like, yeah, he turns into a snake. But is he really that magical if Conan can just cut his fucking head off? No, not really. The Riddle of Steel, there you go. And the reason why these things are so incredible and so good is because they're so grounded. They're very relatable. And I think that World of Warcraft kind of... They should have never had you talk to Elune. Like, Sargeras should never even be on the screen. The Titans should be a force in the cosmos. Should never even hear about it. You shouldn't even know what they look like. And the moment that you start unveiling that kind of stuff, I think things start to unravel. They went the Marvel way. Yes, exactly. And that's what I said. The Celestials, you can never understand the Celestials. It's garbage. It's the same with fucking what's his name, Galactus. You never can have Galactus on the fucking big screen and have it be a legitimate villain. Galactus was perfect in the the Fantastic Four, right? Because it was this ominous presence. The only thing that you ever saw about Galactus was it's like, oh, the clouds kind of look like his helmet does in the comics, and that's it. It is a force of evil that exists in the mind of the person. And I think that in a way, it kind of, if you compare it to this, I think it works, is with scary movies. A lot of scary movies don't really show the monster until the very end of the movie. Because the reveal of the monster is almost never going to be as scary as what people thought it was going to be. That's it. Cosmic horror. Yes.
Olive Garden's never-ending pasta bowl is back, starting at $13.99.
Money makes the world go round. Crypto makes the world go forward.
Reality is tough. It can make you be quite worried about things, and if you feel that some mercenary decision-making is required of the moment, reality is going to give you all the evidence, all the justification that you need to make those mercenary decisions. Yet if you're making a piece of art, making a product for people who really enjoy a series, that can lead to people not being particularly pleased. And that today is what takes me to the story of Creative Assembly. Not only has Hyenas died, but a sea of people have descended upon the Total War Pharaoh Steam page. The latest, of course, in the historical Total War games. Things are not going well for what I at this stage would almost call an embattled studio. If you've not been listening to the news, even on Warhammer, the thing that seems to be their safe cash cow, not all has been good. But what is good, if you want to support the show, is to pick up the art book, The Art and the Making of the Pale Beyond, which is our first video game project. Of course, it's on Steam in the eShop if you've not picked it up already. This is an absolutely gorgeous book, full of art, insight, explanations from the team of how we put the game together. You can check it out on store.bellular.games. They're now in stock for immediate shipping. Let's rock then. The Steam rating is 60%, which as a general percentage isn't terrible, but if somebody says to you, oh, that movie's a 60 in Rotten Tomatoes, it's a 6 out of 10, it's 3 out of 5 stars, you're maybe not going to go and pick it up at full price. But it's actually not that number that is especially terrifying to me. It is that fewer than 1,000 people have left reviews. That means that while there is frustration, there is also quite a lot of apathy, and you can see why. This is a game with a smaller scope. It does not have the grand campaign that perhaps spans Europe, Asia, maybe even other sides of the world, like we've seen in games like, say, Rome 2, Medieval, Empire. No, it is not that. Even though this is being billed both literally and figuratively as a big, full-sized historical Total War game rather than one of the smaller sagas projects, as have existed in the past with Thrones of Britannia and Troy. Indeed, Troy and this will be actually rather similar. The thing though is, if you actually look at the critical reception here, is all of this the fault of Creative Assembly Sophia? What is actually going on? Because if you are a, you could almost say a fair weather, a perhaps casual fan of the franchise, and you go here, you'll be like, yep, it's Total War, it's set in this time period, it's executing its things about as expected for a Total War game with, as Creative Assembly Sophia often do, a bit of a twist on the campaign mode that makes it more interesting. And through that lens, a top critic average of 78 somewhat can be understandable, yet take a look at YouTube and we will see this is just bad, not worth $60. Total War Pharaoh fails in almost every way. The Brutal Truth Total War Pharaoh review. And the reason why these things feel different is some vital community context. There is a general malaise going on with the Total War franchise and Creative Assembly as a whole. Some of this comes from the recent situation with Total War Warhammer 3, a game that on launch was honestly a hot mess with a campaign, with all of its sort of weird battle features and stuff that actually wasn't really good, and with DLC prices that have went up. A community manager explained why all of this is going on because of development costs, that ongoing development has got to be sustainable, but to the community, they didn't really take it that well. You may think this is just some entitled gamers being angry that they're having to pay money for product, but in this case, the price hike really was quite large amidst the more broad context of, well, Total War being a franchise that is not innovating in its very core. Things like how combat works, how good AI is, things like that. And this actually means that Total War Warhammer 3 is at 61 on Steam. That means that a lot of people are not feeling that great about what's going on. And you can really see why this has happened. So number one, you've got Hyenas, that apparently was like their most expensive game project ever. That has been killed. A lot of people are feeling like this is taking resources away from Total War. Like, why are you doing Hyenas of all things when you could just continue with the franchise that you know works? And in the back of everyone's heads, they're thinking, come on, where's the next Medieval game? That's exactly what we would want. And if you're a historical fan, yes, we did get Total War 3 Kingdoms. However, it still had, I would say, a bunch of issues in, the actual real-time combat that are kind of unresolved in the Total War franchise and have been there for a very long time. But also, well, you've been drip-fed the Saga games. I mean, Thrones of Britannia is, kind of like an expandalone DLC for Attila. It didn't really offer a lot. It had some interesting ideas, but as a full package, it just did not end up working for people. You then, of course, have Troy. Troy is a very strange game. Not a massive number of people played it, even though a lot of people did own it. But that's because it was free. It was free on launch day on the Epic Games Store, and yes, while it did later release on Steam, it really did not set that platform on fire. And that's where we get to Pharaoh. Of course, in terms of time period, Total War Pharaoh and Troy are happening in a fairly similar one, albeit in slightly different geographical regions. Now, Pharaoh is a full-fledged Total War title in terms of its marketing and its cost. And you might think, what do you mean by that? And what I basically mean is Rome 1, full-fledged Total War. Medieval 2, which, was kind of like an advancement of Rome, but people would still count Medieval 2 as that. Rome 2 Total War, that's a full-fledged Total War. Empire, right? Empire, full-fledged historical Total War. Often in this franchise, we've sort of seen a really, really big, expansive game and then a more focused game. Empire Total War, Napoleon Total War. That's kind of the way the things had went. And when you look at something like Pharaoh, you basically see an expansion, right? Because in times gone by, this would have been the Kingdoms expansion of Medieval 2, perhaps the Charlemagne expansion of Attila. So essentially a separate, but not necessarily standalone campaign for a core Total War game. Of course, they have had their core team developing the likes of Thrones of Britannia, Creative Assembly Sophia, and they developed Troy. Troy as a saga game. These are usually slightly cheaper than the regular games. They are standalone titles that shrink down to give you a focused sort of fantasy in a smaller region and a very specific one of history, right? These saga titles then have got the reputation of not being a true full Total War title, and that's basically because they tripped out of the gate. The first one launched very messily and never recovered. It's got 69% out of 10,800 reviews on Steam. It did have some good changes, some interesting ones like what it did with food, but overall it didn't really go tremendously. Then you look at Troy, you see, oh look at that, it's blue text. It says mostly positive, but the actual difference in review score is only 3. It's coming in at a 72. So it's quite obvious why historical Total War fans don't really feel that they've been given a great deal. Of course, then you look at Total War 3 Kingdoms, which I think went down like pretty well as a game. It doesn't seem to have had as much of an impact in the West. I believe it did do quite well in China, but in terms of like DLC support, it doesn't really seem like it's had the best. And this is where things get rather funny. We can look here at the Total War franchise on Steam charts. Of course, usually newer games have loads of concurrence. Older ones don't. Not really so. Number 1, we have Total War Warhammer 3 sitting here at about 14.8k. We then have got Total War Rome 2. Yeah, Rome 2 still there doing the numbers. And then we have Pharaoh. And what was very interesting is the launch peak of Pharaoh was 4,701. And really, I was kind of shocked by this. So here's the actual page for it itself, right? Now, I thought this launched on like a Tuesday or a Wednesday. Maybe the numbers will be bigger by the weekend. Do you see that? No. Look what happens here. As I record this, it is midday on Tuesday. Look at that Sunday to Monday drop. That really is pretty darn large. Of course, Pharaoh, the big brand new game, pretty much at launch was trading blows with Medieval 2, which came out like what, 16 years ago, 17 years ago? A long ass time ago anyway. That's basically my point. It's doing similar to Empire, right? And if we want to think about how well the saga titles are doing, well, let's go and find Thrones of Britannia. 351. Let's find Troy. Also, at the time of this screenshot, 351, which is a little bit odd. Anyhow, core point is these saga titles have not had staying power, and I think you can absolutely see why. Look at Rome 2. Rome 2 is like a platform. It covers a big span.
Introducing the Anker Nano Series, the fastest charge for your USB-C iPhone.
Of history and a shitload of content, loads of different factions, all that stuff. Whereas you look at these, more focused in titles, they obviously don't have the staying power. They're obviously not providing a sandbox that really has enough for people to last. I mean, the idea that people are still playing Rome 1, Medieval 2, Empire, and the newer games are almost floundering, it's quite crazy. I mean, you look at these numbers and you think, why the hell are you not making Medieval 3? Because Medieval 2 came out in 2006, and it's the 4th highest game in terms of concurrent players. This obviously is information that Creative Assembly knows. They don't need us to point that out to them. They already know that. So the question is, why haven't they done that sort of thing? And the answer is, they still know they can do things to help the long tail of these games. Rome 2, late in life, had a little bit of a turnaround. I was there for the launch. The launch was absolutely disastrous. And they actually had, along with Emperor Edition, some new DLCs. DLCs that were created by Creative Assembly Sophia, who would later on go and do Troy, and of course now do Pharaoh. There is another side of this as well. Whenever you look at some of those larger, full-size historical games, you can't not talk about mods. If you were to look at, say, like Nexus mods here, you see, you know, thousands and thousands of downloads for the various different games. If you look at Steam Workshop, though, well, you see 7,000 mods for Total War Rome 2 alone. Unfortunately, we can't see download numbers exactly, but Divide et Impera, that is, you know, 10 out of 10. It is amazing. It's what I've most recently played Rome 2 on. And certainly if you're somebody who doesn't like the sort of faster balancing of Rome 2, how some of that combat changed, yeah, that is absolutely the mod pack to get. What this does, though, is it greatly extends the life of that game. Some would say that it's Creative Assembly letting modders finish the game, because Rome 2 was quite the disaster, but it also is modders making a different permutation of the game that maybe more hardcore historical fans would like, because looking at a lot of these mods, what they are focused on is changing the combat model, making things more historically accurate, and also just, well, giving things a lot more depth. And so we're left in a strange situation. There's a lot of games that are not really meeting people's expectations at launch. I mean, Creative Assembly is kind of renowned for being a don't purchase their game on day one studio. We have modders coming in, doing quite a lot of work, a lot of DLC for some of their titles, but some of the Warhammer people not feeling great about how they're being supported. Meanwhile, the historical fans are probably feeling especially bad about how they have been supported. You've got a feeling of a lack of support on individual games that they're kind of moving on to the next thing. So you see the likes of the sagas, you know, the saga games just sitting there at the very bottom of the pile, and really not the best value proposition, especially as Total War Warhammer 3 has so many problems. And then, of course, it's got its overall cost, because considering how all of those games sort of combine and really just have been kind of one broad Total War Warhammer experience over the years, you are, you know, looking at nearly £300. But at the same time, people obviously understand they want to keep on having things that they feel are a good value proposition so that they can keep buying it, so Creative Assembly can keep making it. As Legend of Total War said in his recent video, nobody has won here. Like, their games are not doing as well. They are, some people are boycotting them, yes. There, at the very least, is a lot of anger. You look at, like, that new DLC, it's kind of review bombed, doesn't seem to have produced great numbers. You look at, say, the SteamDB player number data, and it doesn't seem that that DLC actually really led to as much of a spike of players. And you may say, well, it's more expensive. They can afford to get by with fewer people buying it, less of a player spike. To which I then say, Warhammer 3, Warhammer, it is a platform, and if you attrit players over time, you are eroding your core audience base. And all of this basically means that nobody's winning out of this situation. Creative Assembly clearly are not able to do their best, and for players aren't exactly getting what they want. Absolutely everybody here loses. And some, of course, may look at the other big European publisher that does a whole bunch of strategy games, of course, in Paradox. Paradox also do a lot of DLC. I mean, take a look at Stellaris, came out in 2016. We have all of these. Hearts of Iron 4, also 2016, massive amount of DLC. Imperator Rome, yep, that one kind of fell over. Let's not talk about that. Crusader Kings 3, of course, it's been getting a whole bunch of support. Crusader Kings 2 had a staggering amount of DLC, and Victoria 3, of course, also getting plenty of support, with Sphere of Influence coming out in 2024. And certainly, if you look at version 1 of the game, I mean, almost every version of Stellaris has been reviewed and replaced in line with, feedback and testing, almost to the point where one of the issues Stellaris has is different people enjoyed the game sort of to different degrees at various different points in its development history, because it has actually grown and changed so much through its life. So you see this perception of, yep, we have to pay for a lot of DLC, but also this is quite a lot of support. Let's look at Creative Assembly's titles then. And that's where it gets kind of interesting. There's a lot of DLC, and it really would be a lot for me to just list all of this out here. And you could say, though, that this is just kind of no rhyme or reason. Like Shogun 2, it gets 1 year of content support. There's 5 faction packs, and of course...
Wake up in Casey's country, where pizza is breakfast.
Of course, Fall of the Samurai, I think, is one of the greatest DLCs that's really ever happened. Of course, you've got 6 campaign packs for Rome 2, one of them being free. So that's technically 5 years of content support. Total War Attila, that's no more support after a year. Total War Warhammer, that kind of stops after a year, because of course we get into Warhammer 2, which has 3.5 years of content support with a lot of stuff. You have Thrones of Britannia, no DLC. Three Kingdoms, which had 2 years of support, Troy, which actually had 3 campaign packs and then a sort of campaign mode pack, so technically 1.5 years of support, and then Total War Warhammer 3. And what all of this kind of shows to us is a little bit of a lack of rhyme or reason. They're just, sometimes there's free support, sometimes they're not. And basically a trend line that is very much propped up by the Warhammer games, especially Warhammer 2 and Rome 2. But think about this more broadly and count expansion packs, and look at what we actually have from Creative Assembly, the studio. We've got Rome Total War, which then has Barbarian Tribes, was it? Whatever it was called, Barbarian Kingdom maybe, Alexander, Medieval 2, Total War, Kingdoms, Viking, Battle for Asgard, Empire Total War, Stormrise. Who the hell knows about Stormrise? So many games. I mean, pretty much yearly they have been releasing stuff. Most years have had a Total War game. Of course, the thing that's interesting then with Hyenas is Hyenas is not made by the Total War people. Actually, Creative Assembly have been doing other things. They kind of always have if you look through their company history. So you've got that team that did, I believe, the likes of Viking, Stormrise, London 2012, Olympic Games, Alien Isolation, a stunningly good game, and then obviously the development hell of Hyenas. So they absolutely have been pumping out a hell of a lot of content. And what are the times when Total War hasn't been yearly? Well, there's 2008 when they were working on Empire, which was the first game in the Warscape 32 engine, and then 2021 when they were working on Warhammer 3, which is the first core Creative Assembly game in the Warscape 3264 engine. But basically, there's always a new product, be it expansion, new game launch, or DLC. And what that essentially means is a brutal launch cadence. Absolutely brutal. Now, you go into the development rumors and stuff that have surrounded Hyenas, of that being a long shit show, even Alien Isolation being a bit of a shit show in development as well. You then take a look at what core Creative Assembly have had to do with the Total War franchise, and is there any wonder that they haven't been able to take a long time, maybe take a year or two off those core releases so that they can actually have, say, AI be better, or work in the fundamentals of melee combat, which, let's be real, as we moved from Medieval 2 into Empire, melee combat kind of never felt the same, right? And look, I'm not going to pull you into the very extended discussion the Total War community has been having about things like, say, unit cohesion and melee combat, but they certainly have had interesting impacts on gameplay as we went through time. But my core point here is it's been pretty rough. And if we're to assume that the sort of main, big, like Creative Assembly core team, the old team working Total War, the idea that they have mostly been working on Warhammer, and then Sophia have been basically tasked with keeping historical alive with bare minimum effort. I mean, we actually looked through these, right? So, at roughly the same time, you've been having the Warhammer games be made, and also Three Kingdoms. Three Kingdoms being a pretty big scale and historical Total War game. That being said, Three Kingdoms, it is mostly set, basically in China. In terms of, big unit variety and stuff like that, it's probably not the largest that there ever was. I mean, certainly if you said to me, hey, you've got 2 years, you can either make Medieval 2 or, Medieval 2, like with anything near the scope of the original, or you could make Three Kingdoms. I mean, you probably would end up choosing Three Kingdoms. It's all sort of different cultures within a very broader, big culture. I mean, I know that that's grossly not going into detail about the many historical differences and history in that region, but I think you get my drift, right? Versus, you gotta do a whole bunch of Europe, a whole bunch of Africa, and a bit of Asia too, if it's medieval. And I mean, hey, medieval even took us to Latin America, which was quite something, or perhaps even Empire, as we went between, we went between India, Europe, and the Americas. Like, those are damn big games. And that makes me think then, what comes next after Warhammer 3? And that is where my personal hopium, if I was to take a big long rip of that hopium, I would kind of be thinking, right, the people who did Three Kingdoms are probably working on Medieval 3. If you look at the numbers, put on your business hat and your business suit, get yourself in the, look at a picture of Bobby Kotick, then look back to the, to me and think about business. Now, look at this chart. Rome 2, kind of existing there. Oh, look, Medieval 2 Definitive Edition, a game from 2006. is pretty much trading blows with these very new things. Obviously, Medieval 3, if you were to do a 4 or 5 year development project, true biggest scale of a actual AAA dev cycle, would you put it into anything other than a new Medieval? I think the answer is absolutely not. So, I think Creative Assembly's next big historical total War project will be Medieval 3. I think that Medieval 3 DLC support will likely be done by Creative Assembly Sophia, because what's very obviously happened in my mind is, you know, they did Three Kingdoms, they did Thrones of Britannia, then Sophia did Troy, Sophia did Pharaoh. Of course, Sophia did DLC support for Rome 2, like along with Emperor Edition. I think that's where Sophia kind of cut their teeth. Basically, they were another studio who were working on that DLC. Then they were acquired by Creative Assembly. That's why they're called Creative Assembly Sophia. Right, so the Sophia team clearly are doing the best that they can with what they've been given. And when you actually look at the reviews of Pharaoh, people are not talking about, like, oh, damn, Creative Assembly Sophia have bent us over and ruined us again. Terrible. Look how greedy Sophia are. Nobody is saying that. I mean, some people are, I'm sure, but basically no. What people are saying is Sophia are doing their best within the size of their team, the timelines they're given, the resources that they're given. Because evidently Troy came out in 2020, now in 2023, Pharaoh has came out. People are kind of thinking like, why does Pharaoh feel like a mostly reskin of Troy? Well, the answer is fairly obvious. Now, this is where I would point out that Medieval 2 is a reskin of Rome Total War. I mean, you look at Rome Total War, you look at Medieval 2, you look at how crazy fast those development cycles are, and yeah, they're two highly similar games, but I think the point there is they were both big in scope and sort of targeted different, like historical fantasies that were broad, very broad appeal. I think that's why they happen to do so well. And of course, they were able to harbor quite a lot in their, in their combat experience, whereas in Pharaoh, like, they don't have that unit diversity because we really are going quite a bit back in the past. Now, they do have issues like the Warscape engine and Chariot do not always happen to mix together that well, and you can have issues that impact your combat experience, but my god, have Sophia done everything they can within that, with, the weather system impacting the battlefield with, mud and all the things of the different troops. They have tried so hard to get combat variety in what is otherwise a more limited in diversity setting. So I think people don't blame Sophia. It's just, since 3K, and 3K's pretty limited content support, if there is a team that is separate to Warhammer 3 at Core Creative Assembly, I think they've been working on the next big thing, and I think Sophia have been tasked with just keeping the thing alive. And then as we look at Pharaoh, we then think, why was Pharaoh billed as a full historical Total War title? I mean, you can say to people who like history, people like me, it's the Sea Peoples will come, and you'll be playing the game when the Sea Peoples come. You get to play the Bronze Age collapse. To someone like me, that's like music to my ears, right? But this is still a Troy-sized game. They have increased the price. It does not feel as good of a deal. And here's where we see the historical Total War fans being asked to pay more for less. In the same way that the Warhammer Creative Assembly game fans have also been recently asked to pay more for less. And ultimately, that is their problem. All while we find out that Hyenas was allegedly Sega's biggest budget game ever. Quote, total lack of direction. No wonder it feels bad. And this, I think, is where we look to take a shot whenever somebody talking about games on YouTube mentions Larian. And I don't say that to be like, be perfect. Absolutely, no, I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is Larian found their thing, got really good at it, and at one point they took a really big bet to, after Divinity Original Sin 1 and 2, go real big on the most ambitious thing that they'd done. That was only done off a rock solid amount of just competence and experience. You look here, yeah, I know that you guys have been having other things in your company. People who maybe don't know this, Creative Assembly had a bunch of like sports titles, I believe, and other things before like Medieval 1 came out, and then of course Shogun, and that's what just made everyone's minds explode back in the day. Like I remember playing Rome, then playing Shogun after, and that was just a crazy experience. I mean, you even had Rome Total War being it was a British television show where contestants would basically like reenact military strategy from like ancient famous battles, and they use Rome Total War as the visualization visualization, which was quite funny. But anyway, they've always had like this other thing that they've done. But in a world where Alien Isolation is not the sort of thing they're going to make a lot of, where you then go from 2014 to Hyenas now, losing that much money, you just think, what if that Hyenas money was going, and I'm not just saying spend $70 million on Medieval 2 or Medieval 3, but what if a portion of that like went in that direction? What if they said, you know what, these non-core Creative Assembly games that we keep on making, are, you know, core for what we're known for in the market, they are just not as safe, but they don't make sense. How about we completely double down on doing the best we can possibly do in the thing that we're good at? And I think that ultimately is the problem. If you are trying to just keep something alive on life support via these Sagas titles, I think they're kind of missing the point. Warhammer is a sandbox. You know, you wouldn't want to make a Warhammer Total War 4 that is maybe a small, a smaller part of Warhammer lore somewhere else. If you're going to do another Total War Warhammer game, you either make it 40k, which probably wouldn't work, or you make it something like Age of Sigmar, which, in fairness, I don't think people would be that interested in. It's like if you're doing a Total War game, you probably want to go bigger. I mean, yes, Pharaoh is very focused on this one campaign, but it's not like that region of the world was the only place that had history and shit going on at that period of time. Could they have made a far larger game? So the overall lesson here is that they are in the business of creating historical war platforms. And I know platforms can be a dirty word, right? You know, a little Zuck appears in your vision and floats around the place giggling as he wants some metaverse money. Well, that's not what I mean. Point, though, is they're in the platform business. Look at Rome 2. Look how many players it has. That's a goddamn platform. Look at Warhammer 3, Warhammer 2. They've clearly learned, hang on a second, we can just keep making DLC for this bad boy. And even 2 years after launch, look how many people are playing the game. You could do that for Rome. You could do that for Medieval. You could do that for Warhammer. And I have to wonder if that perhaps is the future of their business. If, when they do Medieval 3, will they in fact treat it like how they have treated Warhammer? And I know that Warhammer's in a rough state now, but I've got to say, when Warhammer 2 was at its peak, everyone was having a blast in Mortal Empires. Could you imagine that it's Medieval 3 and that you are eating that good? That is the promise of Creative Assembly, and I hope that they get out of this rough period and are actually able to deliver on that product, because as Legend of Total War was pointing out in his video, right now no one's winning, everyone's losing, and like it or not, Creative Assembly make Total War games. No one else really does it like that. So unless some new competitor enters the market and blows us away, we're kind of stuck with Creative Assembly, and that means we have to have a good sustainable future. That doesn't feel like what we've got right now. Okay, that's it for today's video. Let me know what you think, especially like if you're a long-time Total War fan, what do you think? And if you've just been interested in the franchise, how does all this make you feel? Like, would you jump into a Troy or a Pharaoh, or for you, would you just need to see like, oh wow, Medieval 3, look how big that is, I must play it? Let me know. See you next time.
Every bank wants you to open an account. Then along come sneaky fees. Sneaky, sneaky. If you hate sneaky fees, switch to Bell Bank. We give sneaky fees the boot. Bell Bank.
Why good graphics don't matter.
There's always been an obsession with video game graphics ever since their inception. And as years have passed, graphical technology has improved as hardware has improved, naturally. And seeing the leaps in graphics since the early 2000s has been nothing but amazing to witness during my time as a gamer.
I think so too. I feel like people never talk about this, but some of the graphical updates, especially like whenever we first saw certain games, like WoW, like remember like old Blizzard cinematics? Bro, that shit was like a completely different world.
Over the last decade, graphical improvements began to mean much less. Comparing games from 2020